1, Scene 6 opens in Inverness, approaching Macbeth's castle. There is the sound of hautboys, an ancestor of the modern oboe, and there are torches, indicating to the audience that the scene takes place at night. King Duncan, his son Malcolm, Donald Bane, Banquo, Lennox, Macduff, Ross and Angus enter, accompanied by a number of attendants. King Duncan is immediately struck by the pleasant seat or situation of the castle, and he remarks on how the air nimbly and sweetly recommends itself unto our gentle senses. Banquo agrees, observing that the temple-haunting martlet, or house martin, a summer visitor to the British Isles and well known for nesting in churches, has put its own stamp of approval on the castle by nesting on every available jutty, frieze and buttress that the building has to offer, and that where they most breed and haunt, I have observed the air is delicate. Note the irony here that these birds, who normally favour a sacred building, have instead chosen a place where evil is lurking to breed their young. It seems that it is not only the human realm that has been fooled by outward appearances and lulled into a false sense of security, but also the natural world. Lady Macbeth enters, and Duncan turns his attention to the way in which people constantly offering him kindness is a trouble or nuisance, even though he remains thankful for the love of which it is a manifestation, and that herein I teach you how you shall bid God yield us for your pains and thank us for your trouble. In other words, his gratitude is his way of teaching his subjects to ask God to reward him, Duncan, for the trouble that they, his subjects, have gone to, and to thank him for giving them the opportunity to go to that trouble in the first place. Lady Macbeth, obsequiously, if disingenuously, considering what she has said about him in the previous scene, responds by flattering him and professing her loyalty, observing that even if their service to him were to be done 4 times over, or twice done and then done double, it would still seem trivial or poor and single business, when compared with those honours deep and broad wherewith your Majesty loads our house. Note how her language of duplication and multiplication picks up that of the witches in Act 1, Scene 3. The scene ends with Duncan asking where Macbeth is, remarking that even though they have chased him hard, he, being spurred on, no doubt, by his great love, or his wife, has reached home before them. He requests to be taken to him. Act 1, Scene 7 opens with Macbeth alone in a passageway between the kitchen and the dining hall, indicated by the toing and froing of various servants with dishes, as the rest of the company dine at a state banquet held in Duncan's honour. He has slipped out, clearly feeling the need for some space so that he can get his thoughts in order. In a soliloquy that spans the first 28 lines of the scene, he wrestles with his conscience as he argues with himself about whether he should go through with the murder or not. He begins, "If it were done when 'tis done, then 'twere well it were done quickly." Note the repetition of the pronoun it and past participle done here, which can make this opening sentence a bit confusing. Basically, what he is saying is, if it, the whole business, were over and done with as soon as it, the murder, was done, then it would be a good idea to have it, the murder, done without delay. He continues to muse on the idea of a single murderous act being sufficient to gain the crown without any further repercussions. If the assassination could trammel up, or prevent, any further consequence and catch with his surcease success, or achieve success through his death, that but this blow might be the be-all and the end-all. He tells himself that he is willing to risk judgment in the afterlife for material gain in this one. Here, But here, upon this bank and shoal of time, we jump the life to come. But he acknowledges that judgment and retribution in this life remain a very real problem. But in these cases we still have judgment here, that we but teach bloody instructions, which being taught, return to plague the inventor. He then turns his attention to the not insignificant reasons for him to curb his ambitions. He's here in double trust. First, as I am his kinsman and his subject, strong both against the deed. Then, as his host, who should against his murderer shut the door, not bear the knife myself. He firstly reasons that he is Duncan's relation as well as his subject, and that he is also his host, someone who should strive to protect his guest against harm, rather than bring it on him himself. He then goes on to muse on Duncan's conduct as a king. He cannot even justify the murder to himself on the basis that Duncan is a deficient monarch. Besides, this Duncan hath borne his faculties so meek, hath been so clear in his great office. He knows that Duncan has exercised his royal powers extremely modestly, and as a king has been faultless and honourable. His use of the simile that his virtues will plead like angels, trumpet-tongued, against the deep damnation of his taking off, suggests that the unjust nature of this regicide, and therefore his guilt in the perpetration of the act, will be an affront to heaven. The alliteration of the plosive d sounds in deep damnation, emphasising this, and heaven will not remain quiet. He finally acknowledges to himself that his ambition is the only reason he has for even considering the murder of Duncan. I have no spur to prick the sides of my intent, but only vaulting ambition which o'erleaps itself and falls on the other. He also confesses, using the metaphor of a horse which jumps too high, only to fall on the other side of the fence, that this ambition is vaulting or excessive, and may have fatal consequences. At this point, it seems, he has come to the conclusion that he should not act. His soliloquy is interrupted mid-line, however, by the entrance of Lady Macbeth, who informs him that the king has almost supped, or finished eating, and has been asking for him. He announces that he no longer has a desire to go through with the murder after all, reasoning that he hath honoured me of late, and I have bought golden opinions from all sorts of people, which would be worn now in their newest gloss, not cast aside so soon. Note the way in which he likens the opinions of others as garments that can either be worn or cast aside, and that are shiniest when new, suggesting that they are superficial commodities which lose value over time, and are not necessarily a genuine reflection of the person underneath. Lady Macbeth cannot believe her ears. Her disgust and contempt at what she sees as his cowardice is evident in the extended metaphor that plays out over an initial string of 3 rhetorical questions that she fires back at him. Was the hope drunk wherein you dressed yourself? Hath it slept since? And wakes it now to look so green and pale at what it did so freely? Here she continues Macbeth's clothing imagery as she likens hope to a garment in which Macbeth has dressed himself. But she also personifies it as having been drunk, and that, having fallen asleep in a stupor, has woken up green and pale in hung-over horror at what it did so freely the night before. She continues to stick the knife in, asserting that, from now on, this shall be the measure of his love for her. She accuses him of not putting his money where his mouth is, asking if he is afeard or scared to be the same in thine own act and valour as thou art in desire, and likening him to the poor cat of the adage, who wanted to catch a fish to eat, but didn't want to get her paws wet. Macbeth finally manages to get a word in edgeways, as he more or less tells her to shut up, irritated that she has called his manhood into question. Prithee peace, I dare do all that may become a man, who dares do more is none. On more than one occasion, Lady Macbeth will accuse her husband of not being a man. Are her harsh words designed to shame him into doing it for him or for her when she insults his manhood? When you durst do it, then you were a man, and to be more than what you were, you would be so much more the man. In this intricate piece of rhetoric, she inextricably links ambition with manhood. She says that if he dared to commit the murder, then he would be a man, and in achieving his ambition to become king, he would be even more of a man than he was before. She finishes this speech with probably one of the most shocking and sickening images in the whole play, as she rails against what she sees as Macbeth's betrayal, not only of her, but also of his ambition. I have given suck, and know how tender 'tis to love the babe that milks me. I would, while it was smiling in my face, have plucked my nipple from his boneless gums and dashed the brains out, had I so sworn as you have done to this. Once more she returns to the image of women as nurturers, but she turns this on its head as she professes that she would willingly kill her own child in an horrific manner as it fed at her breast, rather than not go through with what she had promised. It also effectively emasculates Macbeth by implying that he is weaker than a nursing mother. Macbeth, however, is still unsure as he asks her, if we should fail? Note how Shakespeare communicates Lady Macbeth's mastery over her weaker husband at this point in the play, as this brief question is sandwiched between her own words as she both starts and finishes the same line of verse in order to continue her diatribe. She insists that they won't fail as long as he remains brave. But screw your courage to the sticking place and will not fail. Here, the metaphor she uses is taken from the tightening of the strings of a lute, the ancestor of the modern guitar, which is done to tune the instrument, suggesting perhaps that he needs to tauten his resolve and not be so flimsy and spiritless. She then outlines her plan, which is that after Duncan has gone to bed, tired out from the day's hard journey, she will, using wine and wassail, get his 2 chamberlains, or men of the bedchamber, blind drunk, to so convince that memory, the warder of the brain, shall be a fume, and the receipt of reason a limbeck only, or so that they lose their capacity to remember and to reason. While they're in this intoxicated and helpless state, what cannot you and I perform upon the unguarded Duncan? What not put upon his spongy officers, who shall bear the guilt of our great quell? The adjective spongy here describes how the men will have soaked up lots of alcohol, and quell is another word for kill. Note how she finishes on 2 rhetorical questions here, which serve to emphasise her confidence in the ease of the murder itself and the subsequent blaming of it upon his drunken chamberlains. Macbeth is suitably in awe of his wife at this point, exclaiming his belief that she should bring forth or give birth to men children only, for thy undaunted mettle, or fearless bravery, should compose nothing but males. It only takes one more reassurance from Lady Macbeth that Duncan's blood-smeared and hung-over guards shall be blamed for the murder, rather than themselves, for him to declare, I am settled, and bend up each corporal agent to this terrible feat. Her influence over him is clear, as he commands them both in language reminiscent of hers from Act 1, Scene 5. Away, and mock the time with fairest show. False face must hide what the false heart doth know. Here the word mock means to imitate or pretend. In other words, they need to pretend so that their behaviour is appropriate for the time or the occasion. The repetition of the word false here is used to imply 2 separate meanings. A false face is a face which is not a true reflection of its owner's emotions and intentions, while a false heart is one which is disloyal. The pair exit. Thanks for watching. If you have any questions, please let me know in the comments section below, and I'll do my best to answer them. Don't forget to subscribe to my channel for more videos on English language topics and exam techniques and English literature texts.